you hear me clearly?
So Maher Yousef Hassan, he is the Upper Egyptian architect, graduated from Asyut University. He has worked for a while in the development field through his years of university, actually, and currently he is writing his thesis, master thesis in TU Berlin Urban Development about the influence of planning on the course of development of the Egyptian village with his home village as a case study, and his presentation is based on some of the findings of his ongoing research. So Maher, please, you can share your screen.
Okay. Preview. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Preview. Slideshow. Okay. So hello everyone. My name is Maher Yousef Hassan, and I am an architect and urban development master candidate in the Technical University of Berlin. I am happy to present today my findings. Part of my findings of the building Egypt. And can you see it clearly or not?
Yes, yes.
I have a problem. View. Full screen. Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
And there are only some of the findings based on ongoing research work conducting for my master's thesis, and under the supervision of Professor Dr. Rudolf Schäfer and Dr. Engineer Hassan Al-Mulhi at Technical University Berlin. And our presentation will be short and light. I hope you enjoy it. And we will walk through three main sections of the presentation. The first one is why rural Egypt and what is considered rural in Egypt and how the planning is conducted in the rural Egypt, as well as the future of these areas. Second part will be, we will go together through history of the regulations that governs the village planning process, village development, rural development at all, and some highlights of the shortcoming of these practices. The final part will be, we will see the centralized decision-making process and how it's scattered, and we will go in depth the effects and how the rural bodies are governed under this centralized system. And after that, the floor will be open for discussions and contribution. First, what is rural in Egypt and why it's important to be considered in the research field? Why we should, as research urbanists or urban planners, should consider the rural. Rural areas in Egypt is defined by only presidential decrees. So if a village no one wants to transfer or like to be transferred to a city, it requires a presidential decree that says so. As we all know, that the planning and utilities provision are considered services, and the significance of a service is based on the service demand and service receivers. And in Egypt, 2019 census, published by the CAPMAS, Central Agency of Public Mobilization and Statistics, Egypt is 57% rural. And if we took Cairo out of the equation, because it's all urban areas, and this percentage jumps to 63%. And if we go and eliminate all the urban governorates, which are Port Said, Suez, and partially Alexandria, and we calculate on only the hybrid governorate, which consist of rural and urban communities at the same time, this percentage is coming close up to 2/3 of the population of Egyptians. That's why we need, as urban planners or urbanists, to shift our focus to the biggest portion of our service receivers, which are villages and non-urban areas. In this map, we can see the population density of Egypt in 2000 and in the year 2000. So it shows in Delta and Upper Egypt that populated in the narrow strip alongside the line, the majority of the areas are still, in fact, rural. And what is defined urban and what is defined rural is conflict in Egypt. As we can see, numbers of inhabitants of villages are growing more than even some cities in some examples, but are still villages are still considered in the eyes of the government as and the eyes of the government as villages. Why is this? Because it delays. It requires a presidential decree from the president, and sometimes these decrees are delayed. because it comes with more budgeting, more service provision to these places, and more responsibilities that the government or the state doesn't want to bear these responsibilities. And what has happened to the rural areas through the past 70 years, we can show in this graph that the population were and still in this day mostly the rural population, but it's projected in the 2030 to change, and this future it will be dropping down. This is a problem to be the future. This is a problem for the future overcrowded cities and for the sectors that the rural represents as agriculture, rural-related industries, and desertification and loss of agricultural land. In order to understand the roots of this problem, we need to see the history of the policies related to the rural development. It all started in the area I'm sorry. It was started from the era of the English occupation of Egypt, and mainly all the policies were conducted in this era focused on irrigation maintaining, draining, digging, with complete neglection to the livelihood of people in this time. Only in the time of pandemics that will affect production process and for the amount of stolen goods that was shipped to Britain. After that, with the constitution of 2023, and with some of the pressure from the activists and scholars in this time, rural social centers were created for the first time. In the period of from 38 until 52, it was first time that people's livelihood was taken in consideration with the creation of a Ministry of Social Affairs and the creation of rural health units and rural schools, and the trial to elevate the poverty from this area and try to shift some industrial activities through industrial training centers. After 52, with the agricultural reform, it was the first time for the rural children to receive the same quality of education that the urban children usually received. But there was a problem. The state adopted the industrialization plan only focused in the urban area. That led to waves of migration from which started in the 60s until now. It's still people immigrating from the rural areas to the urban areas. And we also turned hardly back to central focus and centralized decision making with a central planning policy that the government adopted in the 60s era, and what we could call collective farming. Collective farming started to hit even harder when the farmer which aimed to control all the agricultural activities. And the farmers were forced to farm and collective specific crops and force them again to sell it to the government with unfair prices. And we could see the results of such behavior in total dependency from the villages on the central state. Then the state realized that those people needed more than as they give it, they were the burning engine of this nation. So they created the ORDV, which is like the organization for reconstruction and development of Egyptian village. And they tried through the years to provide essential utilities and to the villages and form some form of plans of development. After years, a program called Shuruk was realized or Sunrise was realized by this organization and was supposed to give some planning and financing power to the locals. But there was a problem also that we can see that in the next slide. This is a diagram of how the ORDV governed the Shuruk program. The state, with a centralized mindset, couldn't delegate any of its power to the locals and the government. And the program was dominated by central civil servants. As we could see in this chart, where the direct connection to the central government are highlighted in the continuous red, and this continuous red is delegation from also the central government. They are civil servants coming from the central government, only working with the local. But luckily, in 2005, this program was terminated due to financial problems. So at the last what work has been done. It was the strategic planning for Egyptian villages. The program started 2005, and almost 4,200 village was conducted in planning, and it was claimed that preparing in this was through participatory physical planning. But for the village was a tool to change the way planners approach to participatory planning, which is like from down, top down, or from down top. Since the preparation phase included a big number of consultants, local universities, consultant offices, nevertheless, the strategic plan of these villages budget supposed was it including in the plan of the state overall, or the government overall budget. So most of these projects weren't realized, and all these plans were like useless because they were just, as we can say, words on a papers. Going to who is connected to the planning process. In the current practices in village planning, we have identified some of the shortcomings in the process, but we argue that the fundamental problem is a village is always considered a small version of a city, or of a small city with a minimized scale. And this is a misunderstanding of the way of rural life. And the existing laws, codes, or any other form of regulation doesn't address or acknowledge or deals with the village in Delta or Upper Egypt as a unique body, has its own characteristics and singularity. Here in this chart, we could see the entities involved in the planning process, and unfortunately, city and village are in the same category. And due to the weakness of the councils, the weakness of the elected councils, or the absence of elected council, and the limit authority were given to them, the role was dismissed, and mainly the development specialist in the village level wasn't existing because they were understaffed. In the study area, which we conduct the research, and based on many interviews with the civil servants in the study area, it was found that only one engineer serves an urban rural district which has one city, 33 village, and 173 hamlets, or nujur as we call it in Arabic. And with the absence of elected councils, all the work supervising is made by Maher Yousef at the governorate level, as well as the lately produced detailed plans in 2015. When we examined the reports coming with these plans, it was actually built on a data from 1989, which is like way too old. And the civil servants working in these places had no idea where or when this plan were produced. They were just, this plan were sent to them just to implement or like to see. Lastly, the surveys in the working area was conducted on a different division, which called police logistic district, which is like completely different. You can find some parts in some cities and some village follows some other police district than the government district. And when we dig some deep through academia and literature, we found in most of literature found and examined was always the mix between village planning or rural development as a body containing only agricultural activities and livestock farming. And there was no plans that address like the human livelihood or the human beings' need or experience as this rural development or rural areas, there is no people living in it. And when you examined how detailed plans were produced in 2015, it was alleged that there were book of guidelines, but when we asked about this book of guidelines, they followed doing this plans. We couldn't get our hands on it, so we couldn't see how did they do these plans? How did they plans? And mainly in the academic field, and usually the like term projects, for example, in my home university, as youth university, through the years only works and projects conducted over cities and about cities, and there was no mentioning of village work. So we're shifting now of the story of centralized system and how could this lead to decentralization. It all started in 1890 as Alexandria City Council came to existence, was the first time that the government of Egypt to acknowledge Egypt as multiple bodies, not one like one body. And the Constitution of 1923 was the first that gave constitutional recognition to local government and recognized governorates, cities, and villages as legal person. And actually, this was the peak of somehow decentralization and local government's power, because this constitution substitutes that the council should be formed through election, public election, except in social occasions, and should be maintained, mandated with all local matters of interest to local residents, and also should work closely with the local administrative units. In addition to this, the constitution substitutes that the meeting of these councils should be made public, and also the budgets of the council and administrative units should also be public. So after this, we came to 1956. The constitution, the central governments hold the right to appoint some or majority of local administration members, and also holds the right to overrule decision made by this local administration. But we could say that they gave them the right somehow to collect tax and collect fees, which is gradually weakens the power of local administration and local government. So after this, we came into the Constitution of 1971, and especially in the amendment was made in 2007, was the principle of decentralization, and this was the first time that the word decentralization was mentioned in the Egyptian constitution. And then came the revolution in 2011, and the constitution of 2010 gave a clear promise, 2012 gave a clear promise that decentralization should be realized in the limit of 10 years. But after this, 2013 happened, and we had the constitution of 2014, which has an article 176, as a title of empowerment of administrative units, but it's somehow vague without any specific steps defined that how we could go to the decentralization. But in reality, Egypt is considered a central state where most of the powers are concentrated in the capital, Cairo. But we have some interesting types of ministries which can be good foundation for the decentralization process of Egypt. But we also have the state ministries, which only works in the centralized oriented station, like the Ministry of Development or Local Development, as well as the ministries that they don't transfer any function to the local administration, like the tourism and industry. But the third one is the most interesting one, because they have local administrations or directorates, which we are called in Arabic al-mudiriyat, which could serve as a ground base for the decentralization process. Because nowadays they operate based on the central plan without any type of coordination between each other. But if we could somehow combine them in one body, it could be a good ground for moving to decentralization. The problem with centralization system now with these examples of ministries, that was the giving ministry the power of act to separately, that they have power over land management, and land management gain money and influence, and they could finance their own project. So with limited management power to that governates under the like down in the slide, they cannot have money or their own development plan because they don't have resources. So little they can do even know about the projects that are conducted by the different ministries that hold the power in Egypt. Also, that what enlarged the power of centralized system and the increase of conflict between these ministries, as the Constitution article mentioning that the state should provide equally the utilities to all citizens. The central government stripped all the power from the local government and stripped all the ability from this governates, and this governates now are somehow helpless in a way how to fund or how to realize any of its own development plans. And what we can sense from our ongoing research, that due to the neglecting of the local public policies, that led to finding that no need to have these councils anymore because they are somehow powerless and useless. And that led to high rate of corruption due to the absence of local accountability. With different ministry acting as separate states, we could notice a conflict of plans and loss of public money. And the funny story from my childhood, that they asphalted the street, then broke it down to install electricity, because this follows the Ministry of Electricity. And then they asphalted again with the Ministry of Transportation, and again they broke it down to lay the water pipes, because this follows the Ministry of Irrigation and Water. And then they asphalted again, and then we broke it again to lay the lines, because this was the Ministry of Telecommunication. But this happens in the village. In the city, it's a different story, because in 1991, they broke the street to lay the sewage system, and still now, and I'm reaching my 30s, and they haven't asphalted the street yet, or implemented the sewage system. So today, with the breaching gap between academics and practical, as we're speaking about something, what can we do? We could focus our research and shift our focus to the rural development. We could push with our academic production for more decentralized practice. We could also argue the needs of our policies and regulation for the rural development. We could make it a trend if we want. And with more local elected representatives, could help redirecting the projects that they really need or meet the needs of these places. And we should also argue for more capacity building should be done to the local authorities to enhance the performance of local civil servants. When we conduct research, we should adopt more realistic divisions than the government adopting now in doing its statistics and surveys. What I have found until now is that the state overall development couldn't be achieved or realized through only urban development. Rural development is a huge sector of this development. And local power and governments are the key to a strong and rich state, and decentralization is the future of effective development. I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I hope that was light and interesting to you. I would be more happy than to receive your valued contribution on my following ongoing research, and this will be a great opportunity to learn from you and gain from your experience. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Maher. You really, for me at least, you represent a special case, like writing your master thesis on your own case, like village. And I think this kind of research is even, I mean, we need such research, which really shows like facts, like things that you have experienced yourself as a kid, as a young man, and as a professional. You can reflect and you have like maybe the capacity to understand more and more about the details that usually researchers, if they don't belong to the place, they might not be able or aware how to tackle them. So any questions from the audience? Any questions in the chat? أي أسئلة؟ يا جماعة حتى لو السؤال موجود بالعربي اسألوا السؤال بالعربي، مفيش أي مشكلة. يعني
يحيى, he's wanted to ask.
يحيى, please.
صباح الخير أو مساء الخير. Thank you, Maher, for your discussion. I just wanted to ask you more about rural, urban, and the administrative division, because you showed that rural is actually more than what is officially said. So I think it's about 50 something percent according to the census. You said it's 2/3. I've actually read research that says the opposite. There was Eric Denis and Asif Bayat in 1996. They have a paper, Who's Afraid of Ashwayat? So they look or redefine urban and rural based on the number of people in an agglomeration. So anything over 10,000 people should be urban. And it was, I think, 50 something percent. And David Sims updated it in 2006 to about 60 something percent urban versus rural. And if you see also the census, and I understand that it comes from this administrative division, but Egypt is the only country in the world that is becoming more rural, not more urban with time. So if you look at the last 5 or 6 censuses, the percentage of rural is actually growing. It's because the number of people living in places called rural is growing. But of course, there's many different definitions that one can use. So in the US, the census uses 2 definitions for rural depending on which organization needs the definition. So one of them is the number of the population. Another is density. So if you have services like transportation and so on, they rely on density. And here the rural-urban division is seen differently. A third would be also, I think you mentioned this, the number of people or the percentage of people working in agriculture or depending on agriculture as their main source of income. And this you can also get from the census. So I think if this is reread and the number of people working in agriculture is actually going down or the percentage is going down, so in that sense, rural is actually less than it's shown, not more.
Yeah, thank you for your amazing question. But I want to say that I did my numbers based on the official like version of the story. I totally understand that there are a lot of villages that are more than 10,000, and they should be considered urban areas. But the government doesn't recognize this because this will make more work for the government. They should provide some more services, and somehow they said, okay, let's keep it village. Like, for example, my village is not small. My village is almost 100 inhabitants, 100,000 inhabitants, sorry. And this could be
it's a
here
city,
in
not
Germany.
even a town.
Yeah, it's a mother village, but here in Germany, it's considered a middle-class city.
Middle-sized, yeah.
Middle-sized city, yeah. So this is what the official version of the story, but also this was reflected in the detailed plans they do. They make a detailed plan for a village with a main mindset of village planning and which is the size of big city. And that's a shame.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this draws attention to the importance of the definition and how this in law should reflect reality and the consequences of this. I mean, you mentioned, I mean, I remember, I can't remember with whom this discussion was, but villages, when they reach number of population, they apply to be addressed as a city, which has consequences on the amount of budget that allocated to them, which is actually faced by rejection from the I don't know who actually is giving this. Is it the GOPP or?
No, the prime minister. The prime minister argue for the minister to make a decree, a presidential decree, to the president to make a presidential decree. But usually, like my village also applied for this, but was a different village in the same district, and the governorate have one budget for everything, and they cannot divide the money between one district to 3 districts. Now, like Al Usayrat also as well was a village, and now it's a district on its own, which converted to a city. And this was a little complication between like the police departments, the courts, the facilities for Ministry of Youth, and like all the
Mudiriyat.
Yeah, all the ministries that have mudiriyat or like directorates refused, because how could we do a new branch, and this is more staff and more service, and like, and that's like this.
So there is like, let's say, many phases of resistance from different entities trying to keep their authorities, and also based on their lack of resources. So they don't have the resources, so they cannot do the job, so they resist, which I don't know how this can be solved. Maybe joint planning could be one solution. Like maybe we can think of like how the planning of different villages can be done all together, and proposing like services to serve all the district, let's say number of villages together, and in order to be able to provide service to those huge amounts of population or citizens. Otherwise, I don't know.
That's what was mentioned in Professor Shaver morning presentation, and this is one of my somehow findings and recommendation for how to work with to like form a village cluster, a villages cluster, like together, and they can work as a one entity.
There is another question from Sarah Habib from Tanta University.
Yeah.
Yes, hello everyone. Hello, Dr. Hassan and Maher. Thank you for your amazing presentation. My comment is that I think we should just shed the light more on increasing the awareness among people living in the rurals. As for instance, the projects that are held to get over the slums areas, for example, people are moved to new developments held by the government. And unfortunately, they are turned into slums again. So I think it's about the psychology. And for me, urban planners do their work, but still the mindsets are still the same.
Thank you for your comment or question. I hope that I understood, but it's like if in every 100 project in a university, only 2 or 3 projects in the postgraduates focusing on rural, so urban planners and urbanists are not doing their work. As a professor before mentioned that in the undergraduate, no one care about the rural oriented projects, only like a modest number in the postgraduate, the master, on the PhD. So yeah, we are not doing our work. Sorry.
I was just focusing on the awareness. It's about the people, the mindsets, not just urban planning. That's what I mean.
Okay.
But for your presentation and for the project, it's spectacular. I hope people get your idea. I hope it works out here in Egypt.
Thank you.
So Maher, I have one comment.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. About the previous question, it's about the mindset of people is a change somehow. But no, I think that the urban planners, all of urban planners, have to intervene in the social characteristics of the people there. Then if you are urban planner, then you shouldn't concentrate only on the urban planning itself or the process of the urban planning itself. Otherwise, you have also concentrate on people and the social culture, things of people. And then if you are a real urban planner, then you'll have a plan for awareness for people there, and then you'll have a campaign or whatever you are proposing to make people practice with you more, and then you will have a whole of stakeholders participating with you, and then if they are really involved in the development process plan of your urban planning phase, and then the people themselves, they will encourage themselves to participate more in the process itself. So I don't think the urban planners themselves, they are the whole equation, but there is people with them also.
Sure.
Yeah, they take the majority, unfortunately.
Thank you.